talking about the history of the grants, the grant opportunities. So HPNAP had the 5 components, HPNAP A, B, C, D, and E. And as you know, it was opened up for applications. You went through and you applied for the grant. And then the due date came and went, and the grant opportunity was closed. After that time, the Department of Health, people in the program, reviewed applications. Each application was reviewed and scored on their own merits, not against each other. And based on how people were scored, that's what helped or what made the decisions on whose program to fund. Now, as Barb was saying, a lot of the funding that was requested was just too high for the program to support. So a lot of the budgets that were asked for, contracts were awarded to those, but you're going to have to adjust your budgets down quite a bit. And we'll get into talking about how to deal with that. But what's happened since then is the agency staff, the program, developed contract parameters. Some of the contracts, the contracts might have advances, and they set up details about how payments and claims are set up. So they did that in the background. And then they looked at your contract details and reviewed them, and now they've sent it to you, or if they haven't, they will in the next day or two. But I believe they've all been sent to you, the grantee, because changes are needed. Changes, like Barb said, to the work plan and the budget and a few other things. Once that's done, so you're going to take care of that hopefully very soon. Once that's done, you're going to then, it's going to go through a couple other review stages through the contract manager and program manager and people in fiscal and legal at the agency, at Department of Health, and then it's going to be sent back to your organization to sign. And that's done electronically in the Grants Gateway, which of course I'll show you how to do. And then eventually it goes through a couple other signature statuses. Most of them, if it's above $50,000, they'll go to the Attorney General's office for their review and their signature, and it'll go to the State Comptroller's office for their review and their signature. And assuming everything goes well with those and everybody is happy with the way the contract works, once the State Comptroller's office signs it, it's now an executed contract and you can start your work on the contract, on your program. And we're shooting for November 1st in these with a start date, so we really do need to get this stuff taken care of between now and November 1st. So time is of the essence, and whatever you can do even today and tomorrow is going to greatly help you get to that November 1st date. So there are 2 tasks that you'll be asked to work on in the Grants Gateway related to your contract. So one task is called Contract Information Requested, and that is when it's sent to you, and either your grantee or grantee contract manager can work on it and make the changes that we talked about, budget and work plan. Okay, so the program manager and the contract manager at DOH could have done that as well, or can do that, but in this case they really need to have you make these changes. So you'll get it in the status of contract info requested, and somebody at your organization, or maybe more than one person, will need to update your contract details, mostly the budget and work plan. Okay, so that could go back and forth between you and the program if there's any adjustments that have to be made. But eventually, like I said, everybody's happy with it, and everybody wants to move forward and get it signed, and then you eventually get it at that status of grantee contract signature required. So at that point, it's locked down, no changes can be made anymore, and it's now just time to get it signed. So you'll get it as a task, and the person in the right role will sign that contract. So we'll talk about roles in a minute, but just to kind of show you in a diagram those stages. Again, right now we're at it started at Program Manager Review here, and now right now it's been moved to Contract Information Requested, which is a task for you. You'll take care of that, you'll make the changes as we requested, and then you'll submit it. Contract information submitted, and it'll go back to Program Manager. Got some background noise. I'm just going to make sure everybody's muted. Okay. Now, that's not the last stop. The program manager could end up kicking it back to you one more time or several more times if there's more changes to be made. Eventually, you'll send it back to them, and then they'll be happy with it, move it down to someone in the role of contract manager, where they can do the same things, review the same information, and like I said, finally, eventually, back to you to get signed, or back to your organization to start that signature process. So it's important to know about the roles that people have in the system and understand how it works. So the system is role-based, meaning that certain logins only have rights to do certain things in the system. For instance, up here in the top left, the grantee, if you might remember from the application phase, the grantee could start and edit an application and save it, but they couldn't actually submit it to us. It's pretty similar here in the contract phase. They can edit the contract details, you can edit the budget and the work plan and so on. You could submit that back to us, and you'll receive emails from the system when you have a task and so on, but you can't sign the contract. So a grantee can work on the contract details but can't sign it. Person that can sign is over here on the right, the grantee contract signatory or the grantee system administrator. Either one of these two people, the roles are basically the same. What they do is all grantee abilities. They can work on the contract details, the budget, the work plan, and so on. And of course, they can electronically sign the contract. So you need to have somebody in one of these two roles here, either the grantee contract signatory or the grantee system administrator. And that shouldn't be new to you because when you submitted your application, you also needed somebody at least in one of those roles. So realize it works fairly similar to the way it worked in the application phase. And then in the bottom left here, you've got the grantee delegated administrator. And that person can't work in contracts or applications. What they do is we leave it up to them to manage the user accounts at your organization. So we don't know who the right person at your organization would be to sign a contract. We leave it up to you to decide, and the grantee delegated admin is that person that can add or edit user accounts. The other role that they have, which is important, is managing pre-qualification, which is the document vault. And of course, you had to be pre-qualified before you submitted your application, before the applications were due. And you all were, or else you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have received an award. You also need to make sure that you're pre-qualified when you get down to that signature stage. So you want to make sure that you're pre-qualified, and the grantee delegated admin is the person that will work on that. Okay, so grantee user roles are important to understand. We have a manual that hopefully some of you are familiar with, and that's it's on about page 18, I believe, which is a section where it talks about managing user roles. You can get into that a little more in detail. Just a quick way, if you needed to know how to add users to your account, the grantee delegated admin would be able to go to organization, and then organization members, and then add members and new member. And in this new member page, right here in the bottom, that's where you enter in the details, and on the very bottom here is where they pick the appropriate role. So if you don't have somebody in the signatory role and you need to add them, that's how this is done, and like I said, it's explained in the manual as well. Okay, so again, you'll have those two tasks, contract information requested and grantee contract signature required. So when tasks come to your organization, the easiest way is to look at My Tasks. So if you are one of the people that gets the email, you'll have a task, and you can just click on Open Tasks and view it. You'll have your contract in there. You'll be able to click on it and start working on it. So My Tasks are things that are sent to the people who are assigned to a contract or an application. Not to be confused with the task list, which is where you can actually search for tasks for people that, for things that are assigned not just to you, but anybody at your organization. So I'll show you on the next screen the difference between searching and kind of passively looking at your tasks. So again, the easiest way is down here in the bottom. If you're logged in on the home page and you look at My Tasks, in this case it says you have 9 tasks. You guys would probably only have 1 or 2. And if you click that Open Task button, that's how you get the contract that was awarded to you, and you can start working on it. But the system doesn't know who to send it to, and maybe it sent it to the wrong person. Well, that's fine, because you can still search for your contract under Applications, under Contracts, and under Tasks up there in that top bar. And I'll do that when I log into the system. So if you were searching, let's say we clicked on Contract to search for a contract. One thing you could do is just, I know it's kind of small to read here, at least it is for me, but there's a Clear button. You can hit Clear to wipe everything out here, and then just hit the Search button, and it'll search for all contracts for your organization. Doesn't matter what state agency or anything else about it. So if you've only got one contract, it's pretty easy. There's no point in searching for specific words if you only have one contract, or even 2 or 5. But if you've got a lot, or if you want to narrow it down, you can see you could type in the grant opportunity name. When I do some searching, I'll type in the word hunger for HPNAP. You could type in the ID and other options here as well. So I'll show you that as we get into the system as well. Okay, and another thing you might want to be aware of is the period schedule report. So we talked about how we have this date of 11/1, that your contracts really need to be executed by then, and there's some things that have to be done between now and then to get to that point. And those things are here in this period schedule report that you all have access to. So it's separated into two sections. The first section on top here is the contract development steps. So right now it's in this contract info requested in your hands, and we've allocated, in this example, it's 5 days. I don't remember exactly what we did for HPNAP, but we'll look at it in a real one in a minute and see that. But in this kind of fake example here, that you're allowed 5 days to do it. And it shows how many days were allotted, how many days it actually took, which leaves you with how many days. And this is a negative example, showing us that we're at -4 to begin with. So nobody's in trouble if you go over the X number of days you were allotted. But what's happening is it's impacting the final 11/1 date. So that needs to be made up somewhere. So obviously there's some buffers built in a little further down the road, but we want to get to that point. We want to get it so that you can do it ASAP. So again, I'm kind of harping on this, but do what you can as soon as possible. Once it gets through those development stages, now we're into the approval and signature stages. Again, there were days allotted for that, and you can see this in the period schedule report. Again, I'll look at one, a real one, when we get into the system. So you'll notice it talks about statuses and roles here, and the last page of my PowerPoint here is just talking about some of those statuses, just if you wanted to know what's going on when it's at these certain statuses. So program manager review, as the name implies, the program manager is reviewing your contract details. And of course, as Barb said, you may know them as your contract manager, but it's the same type of thing. They're reviewing your contract. We've talked about this contract information requested when your organization is now being asked to update your budget and work plan and so on. Contract manager review is just another status of review before we get into the signature status. There's also a status called contract in internal review. However, Department of Health does not use that, so you probably won't see it get to that status. They do a fiscal and legal review, but it's just not done in the system at this status. All right, and then we talked about the signatures. It gets on to grantee contract signature required, where your organization is expected to sign it. It gets into this contract manager routing. Don't be concerned that it's back at a contract manager. It's at what's called the Bureau of Contracts at DOH. And they're just working on kind of finalizing some things. And it ends up going to the Attorney General's office to get signed, and to the State Comptroller's office to get signed. Couple other things in here that, they might only be there for a day or two. If you see something like AG not approved as to form, or something where it says not approved, it doesn't mean your contract has been canceled or is in trouble. It could be that, there was a missing document or some clarification they needed. So I just didn't want you to be scared if you saw, or concerned if you saw, not approved as to form, what's going on. If it was a deal that you needed to be involved in, your program/contract manager would contact you. So first of all, I want to talk about logging in and the address. Now, you've probably already done this since many of you have been involved in your application. But I wanted to make sure the easiest way to get to it is just type grantsgateway.ny.gov and hit enter. And you can see I'm at the Grants Gateway now. I can log in and sign in with my user account. We want you to not go to www.grantsgateway.ny.gov. I know a lot of people have a habit of typing in www, but notice we get a security certificate error when we do that. So you still could continue if you wanted to, but you're not at the secure website. So the way the state sets up the secure websites is they only do it on the HTTPS version, not the www version. So if we take out www, we're back to the secure site and we can work in it. One other thing I want to say, some people end up trying to Google for it. And if I go to Google and type in Grants Gateway, it brings us not to the Grants Gateway, but to the Grants Reform website. So Grants Reform is our help website. If we click on it, we can see that this is the website where if you go to the Grantees tab, there are pages and documents for you to help you with pre-qualification and training and applications and contracts and so on. But obviously, it didn't bring us to the Grants Gateway. So a lot of people do end up Googling it or searching for it or not realizing they're typing it in their search bar instead of the address bar. But if you did end up on this page, notice every page in this yellow bar has this click here to access the Grants Gateway. So you can still get to the gateway from there, but by Googling it, you're not going to get to the right spot until you do a couple more clicks. I wanted to point that out. So you would click on Login and put in your username and password. Now in my case, we're using a test system here, so I need to log into a slightly different system, which I'm going to do. And I'm going to log in as someone whose name is Jeff Grantee. So I received an email or probably a call from the contract manager saying, your contract is in this status of contract info requested, and we need you to work on the budget and work plan. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to log in as J Grantee and do that. Okay, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You know, things will be cut off a little bit on the bottom. I'll have to scroll, but I think it's a little larger and easier to see. Okay, so I've logged in, and you should be familiar with the system if you worked on the applications, but if not, home is where we start. The Grant Opportunity Portal, that's where you can search or navigate to finding other new grant opportunities that are out there. Applications, contracts, and tasks is where you would search for those items. Progress reports we're not going to use. It's another part of the system that would be used later on down the road, but we're not doing that with this program. So I could click on Applications and search for my HPNAP application. Oh, you can see it remembers the last search you did, and yesterday I searched for the word hunger, and if I do it again, I actually find two because I did this webinar yesterday, but the one we're going to deal with today is this application number 76 for HPNAP Component B, and my organization is called Sample Organization. So I could click on this application number and get into my contract. So that was searching under Applications. Same deal with contracts. I can click on Contracts, and you can see yesterday I searched on the ID HPNAP. I could have typed in the word hunger if I wanted to, or any of these other items. Even if I knew my contract number, I could do it that way. And I'll hit search, and it shows me the results. Again, two results, but the one I want to work with today is this one, number 76. I could just click on it. Not going to do that just yet. Another thing, like I said in our PowerPoint, was if you hit clear, it clears out everything, and then I can search for all contracts that have ever been awarded to my organization. And you can see I've got a number more. I've got 8 of them because this is a test system, but I could click on any one of them to do it. So that's why you would narrow it down, because if you have a lot of them, but it's easy enough to just find it and click on it. Tasks would be very similar, and again, this is more for if it's, you know, it's in somebody's name, but maybe you don't know the rest of the details. Or you know somebody, for instance, with the name Barbara, is on maternity leave right now, and you need to take over some of the tasks that she has. So I can search for everybody at my organization with the name of Barbara who has a task related to Department of Health. And if I click on search, I'll probably find just that one. And there she is, Barbara Signatory, and she has our contract that we're talking about today, and it's contract number 38655. So you remember in the other searches we came up with the application number. This search happens to come up with the contract number. But it's the same contract. Okay, that was searching under applications, contracts, and tasks. I'll go back to home. Training materials is a link to videos and manuals related to the system. Organization is your organization information. And I want to point something out here, so I'm going to click on it. And I happen to have 2 that I'm associated to here. You would probably only have 1. So if you click on organizations, you're brought to information about your organization. One thing that's important, that if you're a not-for-profit, you need to have your Charities Registration number down here, or your Charities Exemption code. If you don't know it, you can call our help desk and we can help you. But it's important to have, this number will show up on the contract. So if I left this blank, it would show blank on the contract, and that would be an issue. If I did know the right number, let's say it was actually 223366, I hit save, and it allows me to save that. There's that number. Only the grantee or the grantee delegated admin can do that. So if you're a signatory, you actually can't make that change. So here is where they would also do the organization members to look at or add members to your organization. As a grantee, I can't do it, so the add button that I showed you in the PowerPoint is not here. But again, that was under your organization button right here, and if you need to work on something related to that, especially that Charities Registration number, that's where it would be done. Next up here in the black bar is your profile. That's your personal profile. If you need to change something about your name, your email or something, you can do that there. And finally, of course, is log out, which would log you out. The blue bar has the save button here and a couple other action buttons depending on what page you're on. So you see that change based on the page that we're on. All right, so let's get into that task that we have. We're not going to view opportunities. That's how to start a new application. We're not going to look at my inbox. You can ignore that. All that is a copy of any email that you might have received from the system. Doesn't let you actually do anything with that. It just lets you know you received an email. So ignore my inbox, and then you're going to go to My Tasks, or you would have searched for it, and you're going to click on the application number. So I'm now in application number DOH 01, HPNAP B, 2017, application number 76, which happens to be contract number DOH 01 for Department of Health, C for contract, or it actually means something else, but we'll call it that, 38655. So you might want to refer to it like this. If you ever call the help desk or something and say, hey, I have an issue with my contract, and they say, what number is it? You can say it's Department of Health 38655. You can give the whole number as well, that's fine. My term is from 11/1/2017 to 10/31/22, but what I'm dealing with is just year one, which is 11/1/2017 to 10/31/2018. It's a multi-year agreement, and we're in period one here, like I said, which is that first year. I was awarded $250,000. That's the period total. That's going to be an issue here because I think, if I remember right, I think I asked for $400,000. So I'm going to have to reduce my budget by $150,000, and we'll see that in a few minutes. This details button, if you can click on it, you can toggle it open and closed, and you can see a little more information. Of course, we're an application or a contract. We know the name of our organization. It's confirming what role you're logged in as and what status you're at. So you're not going to be able to make any changes unless you're in the right role and it's in the right status. And in this case, we are, and it is. All right, so let's do that. Where do we make those changes? If you worked in an application before, you'll know that a lot of the things you did was in the Forms menu, and that's what we'll do here as well. Forms menu carries over everything you entered into your application and now has some more contract-related info. Status changes, it's where we change the status, and we're going to submit it once we're done making these changes. Management tools, there's nothing here required, but if you ever went to management tools and add edit people, this is how you could add it as a task for other people in your organization. Let's say this person, Zora Grantee, I really need her to be on this. She could search for it, yeah, but if I just click on the check button here and hit save, from now on, we can see she's assigned to this, and every time she logs in and it's a status for her, she'll get it as a task, and she'll get the email when it comes to her. So instead of her having to search for it now, I went to Management Tools, Add Edit People, I selected her name and hit save, and now she doesn't have to search for it. It'll just show up when there's a task, and she'll get the email. Progress reports and related documents, you can ignore that. That's not something that we're working with, that you'll be needing to work with right now. So what you care about is Forms menu and eventually status change. So we'll go to the Forms menu. And you notice I can hover over it, or which we prefer is if you click on it and see the whole menu. So let's break this down to the sections here. We start with contract document properties. There's nothing you need to do in this section, so you can feel free to ignore it. If you did click on it, it shows you an example of the master grant contract that the state uses. No point in you looking at this because you have a real contract to look at. This one has all the options, and it could be a bit confusing, but it just shows you the details of it, and if you wanted to read it separately, you can. I would suggest don't bother. Same thing with the attachment A1. This is the specific program-specific terms and conditions. It's part of your contract, and you'll look at it in a minute in a different way. Same thing with this attachment M, which is the MWBE attachment. Ignore it here. You can look at it in your contract instead. So to reiterate, the contract document properties page, you can just ignore it. Same thing with this next section, print application. Your application is long done, no point in dealing with that. Full version of the RFP, yeah, if you want to refer to it again, you can, but that's a link to the RFP. And then application versions, this was the PDF that was created when you submitted your application. Mine was earlier today, but yours was several months ago. And you can always click on it and download the PDF, but it's going to be here essentially forever, associated with your contract and with your details here. That is, by the way, that PDF is what the Department of Health used to actually evaluate your applications. Okay, next is the sections that we need to do some work in. Contract information, project site addresses, program-specific questions, we'll look at those. We'll look at our budget. We'll look at the work plan and make some changes. We don't need to do anything here in uploads. We have a couple things we can do here in the grantee document folder, and we're going to address, or we're going to access the contract preview here to actually look at our contract. And I want to start with that just so you get an idea of what it looks like as it is when we first got it. One other thing is, if you notice these stop signs, these little hands, it's telling you there's an error on this page. So there's an error there, and there's an error there. You're not going to be able to submit it back to us unless you at least take care of those errors. Now, the system doesn't know if your budget is the right amount, or if you're claiming for things that you're supposed to, or if let's say your work plan overview form has all the information we need. That's between you and your contract manager. But the system does know that, hey, there's a problem here, and there's a problem here. And let's just talk about those problems before I look at the contract. Contract information. The problem is that it just doesn't know if it's got the right addresses for your organization. What this does is it's fed from the state financial system, SFS. You have an account with SFS. And SFS, in my case, has this address for me, 110 State Street, 104 Albany, New York. You can see when I hit this drop down, that's the only option there. But what if you had several addresses? It doesn't know which one you want to use for your primary mailing address, or your contract payment address, or your contract mailing address. Now, of course, the contract is not going to be mailed to you because everything's done electronically, but this is still fields on the contract that need to be filled out. So if the addresses are correct, hit save. If you need to pick a different one, pick it, hit save. And that's all you need to do on this page is hit save. Now, what if the address was wrong and you don't have the right address here? Well, that's a problem not in the gateway, but in SFS, the statewide financial system. And if you went to the SFS website, which I'll pop up in another tab here, if you went to the OSC website, you know, you can get a link from us. I'm not going to send the whole, talk about the whole link here. But on this vendor information page, there are two ways you can log in and manage your changes electronically, or you can fill out a report, or fill out a form, I should say, and send it to this Vend Update email address. They have a help desk as well, down here, helpdesk@sfs.ny.gov, and that phone number. So if your address is wrong or something is wrong about your organization that can't be changed in the gateway, it's done in the SFS system. Okay? But in my case, it was right. I hit save, and that error message has gone away. So let's go back to the Forms menu. I'll get to the other pages in a minute, but the other thing I want to show is when we get to our budget. If you worked on your budget, you might have asked for a certain amount, and in this case, I asked for, if we click on Expenditure Summary, I asked for the grant to cover $400,000, which is $127,000 worth of personal services, and then $273 in non-personal services. Well, I was only awarded $250, so I need to obviously make some adjustments here. So I know that's a big change and it's a big amount, but you know that's what happened with this program, or what the situation is with the program. So I'm not going to change it now. I want to look at my contract so you can see what it looks like before you get started. So I'm going to have to address that error. All right, let's look at our contract. So you can certainly go through the pages first if you want, but at some point you definitely need to look at your contract and make sure everything looks good to you. And I think it's going to be helpful once you get down to the work plan section that if you've looked at it first, it might be a little easier to understand. So we do that in the Forms menu down here under Contract Preview. You can certainly click on contract versions later on, but right now, there's nothing here. Eventually, there'll be links to the contract that you can download, but the first one doesn't come in until it gets locked in place and it's ready for you to get signed. So you're not going to click on contract versions to begin with. You're going to click on Contract Preview. All right, so you've logged in, you've gone to the task, you've found your contract, you've clicked on the Forms menu, and now we'll go to Contract Preview. When we click on it, you have to give it a minute because it's building this on the fly. It's taking all the information in the contract background and all the information in your Forms menu and putting it all together into one contract. Okay, so it's ready for me to view. You can see, if you notice the file name, it's Contract Documents. PVW means preview, but it's Contract DOH-01. Remember that contract number was C38655, and so on. And it even shows the date here. So period 1 and today's date. All right, so I'm going to click Open. You might want to hit Save, but I'll open it. So what I did was I was in the Forms menu, Contract Preview, it generated it, and now I can look at it. So it's important, I think, for you to understand what are the components of a contract and what do they look like. So we'll start with page 1, which is just obviously the face page, a little overview here. So I'm contracting with Department of Health, and that's their address. This is my name, and that's the way it is in SFS. But my DOS incorporated name, maybe it's a slightly different name. It's called Sample Organization. So you should verify the spelling and everything looks right here. If we go back up to the right here, there's that contract number again. It's a multi-year agreement. This is a new contract, and my project name. So project name comes from something that I can change in the Forms menu, so I'll point that out. More information about my organization, my vendor ID number, my federal tax ID. Other information for the agency would be here. And then down here is those addresses. So remember the addresses I saved. I could have changed if I wanted to. So if my contractor payment address was different than 110 State Street, there wouldn't be a check there, there'd be a different address. So that's the point of you saving that one page that I showed. And remember, I also showed our Charities Registration number. And if you remember, it was 223355, but I changed it to 223366. You'd never really do that if you had your right number in there, but you know, I just wanted to show you that that's what flows into this part of the contract. So if that's blank, you need to make sure you have it filled out. Your program manager / contract manager at the department will contact you or will have you fix it if it's not there, or your exemption code. Okay, so that's page 1. Page 2 here. Now you can see this says page 1 of 3. It's 3 pages in the face page, which may sound odd, but you can see this one. The next page also says face page. And here's those dates again, 11/1/2017 to 10/31/2022. So my contract is worth $1.25 million. Why is that? Because it's $250,000 a year times 5. So you'll see those 5 periods and the amounts for those periods. Okay, that's page 2. Page 3 is kind of a table of contents. What's included in this document? So I've got besides the first few cover pages and besides the state terms and conditions, which we'll look at in a minute, there's the agency program-specific terms and conditions. So that's included here. Our budget, which happens to be a B1 expenditure budget, is also included. Our work plan, which is attachment C, and our attachment D, which is the payment and reporting schedule. There's also this attachment M, which is the MWBE attachment. Okay, so that's the cover page or the face pages. Next is the signature page. That's page 4 here. There's no signatures here yet. Obviously, we haven't done anything yet to get it signed, but when they do come in, they'll appear here on this page. So your signature or somebody at your organization will be down here in the bottom left. The state agency, the agency signatory will be here. Attorney General and State Comptroller's Office on the bottom here. Now, it's not a cursive signature. You're not actually signing it with a pen or with your mouse or something. It's just you simply clicking a button. But realize, obviously, it's a secure way of doing it, widely accepted throughout the state and the world, really. But behind the scenes is the fact that you've logged in with your password and your account into our secure website and have attested that you are the right person to sign this document. Okay, next, starting on page 5, is the state terms and conditions. I'm not going to read through them here, but you certainly should. That starts at page 5, and it's 25 pages long, so it'll bring you to page 30. So I'm just going to skip down to page 30. Hopefully you will not have, and you will have read it. You need to know what you're signing up for, right? All right, starting on page 30 here is the state or agency or program specific terms and conditions. So this is 8 pages of that. I would obviously read that as well. So you can see page 1 of 8 of attachment A1, and we'll scroll through that. You'll be looking at it. All right, so that brings us to the beginning of our budget. So the budget always starts with the overview, which is all the different categories. Now, we know mine is wrong because mine add up to $400,000, and they really need to add up to $250,000. So I'm going to kind of make things up. You're not going to make things up, obviously. You're going to have to do some figuring out of what can we reduce, what can we change here to get to the number we were awarded. So I made mine, as you can see, nice round numbers. I'm still going to have to use my calculator to figure out some things, but you're going to have to, work on it as you did your application to really figure out the right numbers. Okay, so it breaks it down to the different sections. Personal services salary, I had $75,000. I'm sorry, I had on the right here, the total I was asking for $37,500 for the program director, $31,500 the program assistant, and so on. So it shows the salary detail, the contractual detail. Travel, I didn't have any. The equipment, I didn't have any. I had some operating expenses for $33,000. I had, I think that was it. So obviously my big ones are in contractual and in salary. All right. Next, it brings you to the work plan. And let me go back to the forms menu for a minute. So what we just looked at, which we'll get into detail and make some changes in a few minutes, was the expenditure budget section. So that's all these sections here and the summary. We're now in the work plan, and the work plan has 2 sections, the overview form and the objectives and tasks. So the overview form, if you remember from your application, you've already filled that out. And you can see here, all I wrote was, here's our program summary, these are the things our organization will do with the funding from this grant, and over and over and over again. Obviously, yours will be a little more precise and have information about what your program will do. If there's some extraneous information here that you don't need and it's maybe too long, your program/contract manager will tell you or ask you to make some adjustments. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go in and make some adjustments to mine, but here's what it looks like right now. The next page after the summary is the work plan detail. And you were not asked to actually do this at application time. Some of you I noticed did, and that's fine, but right now you have to. So what you have to do is provide performance measures for all these objectives and tasks that were given to you. So everybody had the objective, if you're doing a component B, to provide nutritious food to target population. And there was task 1, which was food pantries must be open to the public, and task 2, food pantries must meet HPNAP nutrition standards. So what are your performance measures? How are you going to essentially prove to us, or how are you going to gauge that you've accomplished your goals? So the performance measures are really goals with, if they can be quantifiable, that's what makes sense to us. Do something by a certain date. Be able to serve a certain number of people. Numbers and dates and things like that are really the most valuable here. So it's going to take some thinking on your part to figure out what you need, but if you've done this before, you probably have some kind of information. All right, so right now in the forms menu, mine are all blank, which is why it's blank here in the PDF of my contract that we're looking at, but we're going to make some changes so that they're not blank. All right, so I'm going to skip through that right now. So my work plan we're going to have to work on. And then it comes into attachment D, which is that payment and reporting schedule. All right, so the way you read these is if there's something that's blank or a line that's not filled out, it doesn't apply to you. If there's something that is filled out with a number or dates, it does apply to you. So in this case, I have an advance that's allowable to me, and I can have an advance payment of up to 25% of my budget. So I can request once my contract goes live and it's executed, I can request an advance of up to 25%. So I don't have a scheduled advance. There's nothing here in that field, and that's why. If we go down here, it talks about claiming. If we want to put in claims for reimbursement, they want us to put in claims monthly, and they're due within 30 days of the end of that month. So you have to put in your claims, and you have to do it within 30 days. Okay? So this next chart doesn't apply to you because you don't have scheduled claims. You have claims monthly, 30 days. Or in my case, I'm guessing you're all the same, but in my case, that's what it is. The next page, section 2A here, is reporting provisions. And these are reports that are due from my organization. And you can see several of them are not checked, which means I don't have to do them, but I do have to do this final report. After the end of every period, meaning every year, a report is due 30 days later. So if my period ends on October 31st every year, I have to provide them, the Department of Health, with a report, a final report, by November 30th. Okay? Now there's a couple other reports that you're going to have to deal with, and I'll scroll down to show you that. So this next section says if there's progress-based reports or a final progress report, it would have information. There isn't information here. But what there is information on is if we scroll to this next page, special payment and reporting provisions. So this is a schedule of reports that you do have to do. You have to do a service report on a monthly basis and 30 days after the end of the month. You have to provide the milk, produce, and grain report 30 days after the end of the month. You have to provide the mid-year plan report, which is, of course, every 6 months, 30 days after that. And the year-end work plan report 30 days after the end of the contract year. Okay, or period, it's referred to. So that information is important for you to know. It's not on these previous pages. It's typed here on this section 3. So work with your contract manager to understand those reports. Obviously, that's not something you have to worry about right now. Deal with getting your contract executed, and then deal with the reports. All right? The other thing here is MWBE, and I forgot to ask the program if this is applicable to everybody, but in this case, I had this one that was, the goal was changed to 0%. So Barb, once we unmute, I'm going to ask you to address that because I forgot to ask about that. Actually, why don't I do it now? Where are you here? You're unmuted.
Hi, Jeff. Hi, everybody. The goal for MWBE is 0 for all components.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That makes it easier. All right, I'm muting you again. Okay, and finally we're brought to attachment M, which does have to be on it for MWBE, but as Barb said, the goal is 0%, so it's just kind of, you know, they had to cross the T's and dot the I's type thing. So that's what this is. So that's the entirety of our contract. Ours is 63 pages here. Yours may be a little longer, a little shorter, depending on what you have for your performance measures, what you have for your work plan. Now, of course, those are blank for me, so let's get working on those. So I'm going to close this preview, and I'll just close the PDF. And I'm going to get back into the Forms menu and work in the system. So we've been sitting here for a little while, and I've been talking, and I wanted to mention about the timeout. And you might have dealt with it when you did the application. The system will time you out after 20 minutes of inactivity. And what we were just doing was seen as that inactivity. Activity is hitting the Save button or changing the page. So if I just click here on Personal Services Salary, I've reset that 20-minute clock, and it won't log me out. Now, it's obviously not the end of the world if it logs you out, but if you're in the middle of typing out something really long and you forgot to hit Save, and then 20 minutes goes by, you've just lost all the information that you typed. So do make sure that you're hitting Save or changing the pages every few minutes. You know, at the very maximum, 15 minutes or so. Don't let it go to 17 or 18, 19 minutes. All right? So let's just refresh what we have to do here. There's two big issues I want to deal with. One is the fact that my budget doesn't match what I was awarded, and the other is that my work plan is blank. At least my performance measures are blank. So let's go up to my budget and work on that. So if you look at my expenditure summary, again, I was awarded $250,000, but I had already previously asked for $400,000. So obviously I need to make some changes. In your case, like I said before, you're going to have to do some calculating and figuring out and talking with your program and seeing what you can do. In my case, I'm just going to randomly reduce it by $150,000. So we go to the Forms menu and Salary. Let's say we've decided that, so I have three things here. I have the Program Director, Program Assistant, and Meal Distributors. So maybe I decided, you know what, I have to get rid of the Program Assistant role or reduce it. Let's say I reduce it down to, just to make the math easier here, I'll make it $4,500. So I'm saying I'm not going to fund them for 70%, I'm going to fund them for 10%. And 10% of their $45,000 salary is $4,500, and I'll hit Save. Now I want you to notice something on this page, and that is this Total Other Funds. And some of you used that when you did your application, and I don't remember if you were instructed to or if we forgot to mention it, but we actually don't want you to have anything in that Other Funds field. So it's important that you keep it blank. What this really means is, all right, if their salary is $45,000 and they're working 12 months on the program and we're only asking for $4,500, where does the remaining $41,500 come from? And you could put that here in Other Funds, but we don't want you to, and the reason for that is it doesn't display the way the State Comptroller's Office wants it to on the contract, so they will kick your contract back and reject it and have us work it over again if we get that far. So what we're saying is, even if you wanted to or you had before in your application, you need to blank this out. Total Other Funds should be blank. So don't put a 0 there, just blank it out and hit Save. Okay, so I reduced the amount of my Program Assistant. I'm going to have to take out my calculator and do some changes here, but I know that in contractual, I have a lot as well. So contractual, I had $240,000. Let's say I'll reduce this by $100,000. And you know, you may have several contractual items. I only had one in this case. I'll reduce this down to, I'm just picking something right now, 120. So I halved it. All right. So if I go back to my expenditure summary, I still have an error. And what's my difference now? Oh, good, $3,000. So I need to figure out where to take out $3,000. And obviously, I can do it here from operating expenses, and it'll be easy for me to do the math. So your changes might necessitate you changing your narrative. The narrative doesn't show up on the contract. If you remember what we looked at, there was no narrative there. But whatever you wrote in your application phase may not be accurate anymore because you might have had to reduce that. So we would like you to update your narrative to just, make sure that we're on the same page and we know what you're claiming for. All right, so you might need to adjust your narratives. If there's something that you're going to delete completely, and I'm not going to do this, but let's say in salary, I had 3 people and I realized I'm going to delete, one of these, let's say program director. You go to it, you hit go, and then you hit the delete button right here. It's going to warn you, are you sure you want to delete this? This will delete this entire page. And you would say, okay. In my case, I'm going to hit cancel because I really didn't want to. But that's how you delete a whole item. So it won't delete everything in personal services salary, just the one you happen to be on right now. So this delete button deletes the whole thing, and then you would change individual items by changing them and hitting save. Okay, so back to the forms menu. I'm going to go back down to operating expenses and get rid of $3,000 there. So if we look at it, I had $15,000 for parking. I had $15,000 for fuel and probably $3,000 for the other item. So one other thing here is the description. If you remember, I closed it, but if you remember in our contract, it only shows this first line for each item. It doesn't show the justification or detail line. Your contract manager may ask you to give a little more detail on the name line so that it shows up in the contract. So if I was to do that, I could do something simply like this. Direct cost of fuel for the 3 mobile feeding vans, and hit save. Okay, so let's remember that, and you'll look when I preview my contract again that it'll show that, whereas the other items may not be as descriptive. So if they're asking you to be more descriptive, you can do that by adding your description in the name column. Okay, and we do need to reduce this, so I'll bring this down to $12,000 and hit save. And if my math was correct, my expenditure budget should not have an error anymore. And we'll scroll down and we see that there is no error here because if I click on it, $250,000 is the same as what I was awarded, $250,000. So I had to do some reductions here. I brought this down to $100,000 and I brought this section down to $150,000, which of course adds up to $250,000. So obviously it's not going to be as easy for you, but make sure that that's how you do it. And I want to verify that other funds is all zero. If I missed one, I can go back and change that. One last thing I wanted to talk about in the budget is if you need to, let's say you had a whole bunch of items in salary. I only had 3, but let's say you had 15 and you wanted to just double check everything and see what you've done. On the very bottom of any entry in any section, there's this, Category Total Summary. This will allow you, if you click on it, it's going to download just this category, which is personal services salary, into a spreadsheet I can open and view and edit if I wanted to see what I've written in here. So let's say I haven't made my changes yet, and I'm going through here, and I could just put in a formula to figure out calculations, and I could figure out which ones, how it works to reduce or change my budget. So whatever you can do in Excel, you can do here. Obviously, there's no formulas in this when you download it, but you can add the formulas if you want. So that's what you can do here with this button, the Category Total Summary. All right, so I'm done with my budget. I'm going to skip around. I forgot one other thing I wanted to mention. If your contract manager tells you the name of your project needs to be updated, that's done here in program-specific questions. So if you remember during your application, you were asked to give a project title and then answer all the questions. You can see my answers were just here are my answer. I don't know how I got approved, but I did. But in your case, you'll have real answers which have no bearing anymore because they're not part of the contract, but the project title does. And this is going to show up on your contract on every page or most pages, and if you did something wrong here, they're going to want you to change it. So let's say, I'm just going to write something, new on, today's the 17th, right? New 8/17. I'm only doing that just so you can see changes that I make, how they reflect in the contract. So remember that I did that, and we'll get back to the contract and see that where that comes from. All right, so let's take care of that work plan. And I should not have closed that contract before. So, work plan. We looked at the overview form. And that section, which is here's our program summary, these are the things that our organization will do. Again, maybe you had some extraneous information we wanted you to edit. That's fine. Maybe I need to delete this here. Okay, I need to delete that and make some edits. Maybe I need to make some changes, so that's what I'm going to do. I'll add something down here. Here is an update from Thursday, 8/17. So obviously you'll write real sentences that mean something to your project, but I just wanted to do that so you can see when we look at our contract, that'll be there. All right? So that was easy, but the harder part is this objectives and tasks. So remember, there are 5 high-level objectives: provide nutritious food, client choice, purchasing of food, safety and sanitation, HPNAP initiatives, and I think they're slightly different in different components. Each one has one or several tasks, and each task has needs you to write in performance measures for how you can accomplish those tasks. So I'm not very good at this as far as from a program perspective, so what I'm saying is not going to be what you're really going to be entering, but let's do one. So for the objective of provide nutritious food to target population, which has a task of food pantries must be open to the public, must be based out of a faith-based facility or other community organization. You have to have a performance measure for that. So I'm just going to write something simple for this one. I'll do something better as we go through. Here is the PM. Here are the details. So you need to give it a name and details. So maybe it's number of people served. And then in the details is we will serve X number of people. So let's go back. And how do we go back? Navigation is also part of the challenge here of you learning, because you can't just hit the back button because it brings you back to where we were. You have to hit it twice. Now that I've hit it twice, it doesn't really indicate to me that I've done something on that one, so you kind of have to remember. But I do remember, and now I need to go down here to task number 2. So we must meet soup kitchens, must meet HPNAP nutrition standards, okay? So a performance measure here could be meet standards, and the narrative is, so I haven't picked anything that is quantifiable yet. So I'm going to hit back, and I'm back to that original page. Let's go on to client choice. Okay, food is set up on the table by food groups, and clients walk by each table to choose and pack their food. So maybe that's not applicable to me because I'm a mobile truck. We can type in NA for these. I wrote NA and then not applicable to this program, and I hit save. I'll go back. Let's see. I don't have any good suggestions. Let me go back to the next one. Purchasing of food. Okay, so distribute food packages, meals in accordance to the HPNAP minimum food guidelines. So I'll call this maybe distribute food. And the narrative, maybe here I'm including numbers. So distribute XX amount per month, something like that, and hit save. Okay, and then I'll move on. I'm going to do 1 or 2 more. Let's see here. Let's go to safety and sanitation, hit go. And these are 4 things that my program may have to do. So let's say, you know, I'll do this one, number 3. Again, PM name here. Here is the details. Here are the details, but you get it. Okay, so I've done that. So I may want to look at, you know, what does this look like? Did I do everything I needed to? Have I missed any? Certainly you could go through and navigate back and forth, but it's a lot easier if we just click on Contract Preview and see the results of what we've done. So just like you've done before, I've hit Contract Preview. Okay, so I'm previewing the contract. I've made the changes. We've already looked at it before, but we didn't see the changes that I've made. So if we scroll down here, there's my budget. We know that looks good now. There's my $250,000, and here's the details of everything. And remember, we wanted you to not show other funds, and that's because it doesn't show here, but it would show in the total, and that would confuse somebody at State Controller's office because the math wouldn't add up. So that's why we're not showing other in your forms menu, because it wouldn't appear here. Okay, so we're going to scroll through this, our different sections of our budget, and get down to our work plan. Remember, I made a slight change here. I deleted a couple paragraphs or sentences, but I also added, here's an update from Thursday, 8/17, just to show you that what you made as a change in the forms menu reflects in your budget. Okay, so that's done. And then here's our work plan. Objective 1 now has a performance measure, and Task 2 has a performance measure. Objective 2, Task 1 has a PM, or it says not applicable. Task 2 doesn't, Task 3 doesn't, you know, I only did a few. Objective 3 has a performance measure, and it's a quantifiable amount. And then I didn't do anything for Objective 4 and Objective 5. So the system should allow me to move it through. I think it does, without those. But you want to make sure you're addressing what you need to address. If I didn't do anything with increase the purchase of non-flavored 1% or fat-free milk, and my program needs to do that, and that would have been a good one I should have done. I could have put an amount here in my performance measure, and maybe I'll do that before I stop. But if I needed to, and I didn't, system's not going to tell you that, but your contract manager certainly will, and will say, hey, you got to go back and fix that. You forgot to do that. So I want you to make sure that you're happy with, and everything, you know, everything you've done addresses what you need to before you send it to the next status. Again, it's not the end of the world. They can send it back to you, or they can make the change, but you know, try to be thorough here to make sure that we can do it kind of as quick as we can. So I am going to do that. I'm going to go to Objective 5, Task number 1, and I'm going to just, you know, put in a goal. So I'll go back to my Forms menu. I'll go back to, scrolling down to my Objectives and Tasks, and I'm going to go back to Objective number 5, HPNAP initiatives, and I'm going to do the milk one. I'll click on Add, and let's call it milk purchases increase from XXX to YYYY, something like that. Or maybe you say per month or per quarter or whatever it happens to be. All right, so I've done all the changes that I think we need to do. I've gone through the Forms menu. I've updated my contract information, which is those addresses. I looked at the program-specific questions for the title, made sure the title was right. I went through and adjusted my budget so that my expenditure summary equals the amount that was awarded to me. And I went through and adjusted my work plan overview form, the actual text of what we're going to do, and the objectives and tasks, and I added performance measures to those. The last thing here is the grantee document folder. And this is not something that was part of the application process. It's now here in the contract process. And that is, there's documents we want you to provide us so that we can add them in what's called the contract package for OSC to approve. So they don't become part of the contract, but they're part of the whole overview or the whole portion of your contract. So I click on the grantee document folder. It gives you this little error message that just says, if you're wondering, why is the save button not available? It won't be available until I start typing in here. But there's some documents that we want you to provide us. For instance, an MWBE document, a workers' compensation, a insurance document. So whatever your contract manager is asking you to provide, you have to have it in a PDF form and then upload it here. So let's say this is my workers' comp, and I've got it saved to my computer. I click on Browse. I'm just going to use a, kind of a fake document here. And if you want, you can explain it with comments and hit Save. Now, in yesterday's webinar, I was going to tell them that you might get an error and the Save button still might not appear, and it didn't work. The error didn't happen. The error did happen today. I went through those, and I don't have a Save button. Why is that? I don't know why. It's a weird bug that we need to fix, but I'll show you how to get out of it. It's something to do sometimes with, actually I know what it is now. Now that I realize, I know what it is. Instead of me typing workers' comp, I clicked on this. It must have a problem with that. So if I type in workers' comp, let's see what happens. No, still didn't do it. So how do I do it? Well, I need to go back to the grantee document folder. And this time I'll type in workers' comp. And then I'll hit the Save button and save it, or the Browse button and attach it. And notice my Save button is there now. So I don't know how to explain it. Don't think that you've done anything wrong if it doesn't give you the Save button. Go back and try it again. But you can see by typing it in and then selecting the document, I was able to select it. So now I can hit Save, and I've saved my workers' comp document. All right? So I can add more if I want. I can view the file that I've attached right here and click on View File to see that PDF. And I can also click on Add to add another document. So let's say this is disability insurance. All right, and I'll hit Browse and find it. There it is. There, my Save button has appeared. Don't need a description if you don't want to, but if you do, type it in and hit Save. And I've now added that document. So what happened here, if I go to Forms menu, those documents are now permanently associated with this contract. And my contract manager can go in here and view them, download them, and make them part of the contract package that gets sent to the State Comptroller's office. Okay, so now I'm happy with everything. If you want, you can preview it again. I'm not going to bother. But now I'm ready to send it back to my contract manager. So I'll scroll back up, and I'm going to do status change and apply this status. If there was an error, the system would give you an error and wouldn't let you proceed. So I'm going to just introduce one quick little error. Let's go to contractual. I'm going to mess up my budget again. I'm going to make it off by $1. Even if you're off by 1 penny, it would give you an error. So let's pretend I don't notice this error. And I'm going to try to submit it. I'll go to status change, contract information submitted, and it says, wait a minute, you've got some errors here. One error type is something that you have to fix. Another error type is just something for you to look at. And you can tell the difference between them because the just need to look at it type error says this. Information populated on this page is derived from other pages that were changed. Please review this page for accuracy. And it's kind of an annoying error, but what it means is this. Let's click on it to get to that actual page. All I have to do is look at it and say, yep, that's fine. Or I can hit change it and hit save. So what did it mean? What it meant was I made a change in this program information page. I changed program specific questions. Remember, I changed my title and I hit save. I changed contract information. That was the 3 addresses, and I hit save. And the system is saying, wait a minute, you made some changes there. Are you sure that didn't affect something in here? And obviously it didn't, but it's just the way the system is set up. So it wanted me to double check it, and I didn't even have to hit save. All I had to do was look at it. So I've taken care of that error. And if I try to submit it again, of course I do have that one error where my budget is $1 off. So I would click on Expenditure Summary, and say, what did I mess up here? And I say, oh look, $250,001, and it should be $250,000. So I'll go back to contractual. I could have just clicked on that hover there. I'll fix that $1 amount. And now the system should be happy with my answers or with my details and allow me to submit my application, or I'm sorry, submit my contract. So status changes, contract information submitted. I've now just sent it back to my contract manager. How do I know? Well, if I click on details, I can see now it's in the status of program manager review, not contract information requested. If I go back home, that task that I had is now gone. I don't have any tasks. So those are ways of knowing that you sent it, and they'll get it, they'll be monitoring it, and they'll be looking at it, and we'll now start reviewing your contract. If they have a problem with it, they'll send it back to you. Notice if I go and search for that contract, I'm searching for the word hunger, and remember I have two because I did one yesterday, but the one we want is this program manager review one. If you went back into it and you tried to make a change, it wouldn't allow you to because it's not in your status anymore. It's in the status of program manager review. If I go back to one of those pages I've already changed, like contractual, where I changed that $1, and I typed in some insane number, notice there's no save button here. So I can't put in 100 million for this, of course, because there's no save button. So it's not in your hands anymore, it's at the program manager status. So I'm going to log out, and we'll log in as somebody at the state, and she's going to review the contract, and if maybe she would send it back to you and you'll fix something, you'll send it back to her, but eventually they're going to approve it and move it forward. So I'm going to sign in as this person, and obviously this is not something you need to know about. She has her task, she clicks on it, she'll do the same types of things you did, make some changes if necessary, send it back to you, preview it, but she's happy with it now and she's going to forward it on to contract manager. Now the contract manager has it, and that person logs in, and they have a task, and they open up your contract, and they do the same thing. They review it, they go through it, they look at previews. If they need to send it back to you, they do. In our case, they don't. They're happy with it, and they're going to now get ready to get it signed. So they're going to move it to this grantee contract signature required status. So when I click this button, or when she, the program manager, clicks it, contract manager, it's now creating a saved PDF of your contract. It's also now sending you an email that says you have a new task in the system, and it's moving it to that status of grantee contract signature required. So I'll log back in as you or somebody at your organization. But I'm going to log in as the grantee first. And you remember from the beginning of the session that the grantee is not allowed to actually sign it. So I do have a task, though, as a grantee. I'm a grantee. And I go into my tasks, I open it, and I click on it, and it says signature required. Okay, I'll sign it. No, I won't, because, of course, I don't have that status option. So just because you got the task, if you're not in the right role, doesn't mean you can do anything with it. So let's get in the right role. I'll log out. I'll log in as B Signatory. And she should have the task. You can see my task. If she didn't, that's okay. She could search under Applications, Contracts, or Tasks. But I'll click on Open Tasks, click on it. And you really should do one last preview before you sign it. So if I go to Forms menu, you remember down below we did this contract preview. No need to do that now because if I go to Contract Versions, there's a saved PDF for it. So this is what it looks like, saved, and if I click on it, I can look at our PDF. I'm not going to right now. I'll look at it once we save it, or once we sign it. So I'll close that. And just, again, another reminder, I could go to any page in here, any page that let me make a change before, and notice it doesn't matter because there's no save button here. So I can only look, I can't make changes. We've locked everything down. Okay, so I'm happy with it. I do want to sign it. I'll go to Status Changes and apply the status of Grantee Contract Signature Complete. These other statuses are not applicable right now, but if I didn't want to sign it because I found an error and I wanted to send it back to my contract manager, I'd call them first and say, hey, I've got this problem, can we fix it? And then they'll say, yes, go ahead and send it back to contract manager review. But I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to go to Status Change and apply the status of Contract Signature Complete. It has you read this agreement, which is basically saying, I am who I say I am. I'm allowed to sign on behalf of my organization. I'll adhere to MWBE and everything else that we have in the contract. And I click on I agree. So it's now signing my version of the contract. It's adding my signature to the page. And in a minute, once it saves that PDF, we'll see that. Okay? So I'll go back to Forms menu. Let's notice by clicking on Details, it's now in this status of Contract Package Validation. And I'll go down to the Contract Versions. And we can see that Barbara did sign it today at 2:58 and 57 seconds. And if I click on it and hit Open, we can see on page 4, Barbara's signature. Again, there's nothing in cursive or anything. Make sure your title is right. And as it goes through the processes, that same thing will happen for agency signature, Attorney General, and OSC. Okay, so how will you know when your contract has been executed and completed? You'll get an email. So make sure the right person is here under Management Tools, Add Edit People. If all along Barbara was working on it, but she wasn't checked on it, make sure that she is. Or if this person, TVenGS, needed to be on it, make sure they're checked, because they won't get it. They won't get the email to let you know that the contract is executed unless they're checked on there. Anybody who worked on it and saved it will be automatically checked. Okay, so you'll know that it's executed because you'll get an email, hopefully prior to November 1st, that says your contract has been executed. Again, one more thing you can do is if we go back to the main page of our contract, we can look at this period schedule report and see where we are. So if I click on it and hit Open, it shows me this PDF that I can zoom in on here for you and see that we had 3 days scheduled for Program Manager Review. It took 0. We had 7 days scheduled for Contract Info Requested. It took 0 because I did it in the last hour. And we can see where we are, how many days were scheduled, how many days are remaining, and so on. Okay, and then on the next page, it just shows what status it went to at what day and what time.